Hello, everyone. I'm Elijah Gill, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to TheWrap's Pro Roundtable series, The Fight Continues, Hollywood's role in LGBTQ representation and safeguarding rights. Let's meet our amazing panelists. Jodi Balfour, an actor from Ted Lasso. How are you, Jodi?
I'm great, thanks. Happy to be here.
Joel Kim Booster, writer and actor from Fire Island.
Hello.
Tituss Burgess, actor from Schmigadoon.
How are y'all?
Harvey Guillen, actor, What We Do in the Shadows.
Hello.
Devery Jacobs, actor, writer, and director from Reservation Dogs.
Hey, what's up?
Nicole Maines, actor, Yellowjackets.
Hello, happy Pride.
Nico Santos, actor, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Hi, Nico.
Hi, everyone.
I want to thank all of you for being here, and obviously, happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Yes. So, the first question I want to ask each of you is, what was the reaction from your first agent, and were you scared in the beginning to come out? And I want to start with you, Tituss, because I know you've been in the game for a long time.
How dare you? Was I afraid to come out to my agent? Absolutely not. I kind of live out loud. There's no really masking what I house, and it's like it's all one and the same. I'm gay, I'm Black, I'm Christian, I'm spiritual, I'm all the things. And if you only know how to represent a slither of that, then you should be my agent. So that was a very easy thing, but it wasn't even something we discussed. It just sort of it was theater, so it's kind of like, girl, we all know.
How about for you, Harvey?
For me, my first agent was queer themselves, and they the ones who recommended that I shouldn't come out. And I was like, but I feel like that's living a lie. And they're like, yeah, but you're not gonna get that many roles because you're already short and round and brown. And I was like, yeah, those are the things that make me great. And I always like to pride myself that I'm round, brown, and proud. And I was shocked that this was someone that's going to represent me. So needless to say that we did not work well together. And I ended up moving my round brown ass out of his office into another agency.
As you should, and we're so glad you did. How about you, Jodi?
I have been here for like 5 whole minutes, so I feel like my experience with my reps has been slightly different. In that, like, I don't know. I felt like I'm really, really close with them, and they know me so well. And I never really like made a point of being like, I have something to tell you. I was just like, I'm in love with this person now, and here I am, and I'm really excited about it. I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited about, for me, like what happened sort of simultaneously was I was playing a queer character on TV who was coming out, and you can call it coincidence, you can call it spirituality, whatever, but like I really had a sort of a parallel experience with the character I was playing, and it was like the most beautiful experience for me, and so it felt very embraced.
Like Tituss, I came in when I signed with my first agent. I had already been leading with my queerness in my career as a stand-up for a long time, so it really wasn't a question. I was more afraid of coming out as an Asian person, I think, to my agent at the time. That's the first time when we first met, because I think like which do you want to lead with? And I was like, why can't it be both? Like why do I have to bisect my identities and like lead with one over the other? And it was like they're gonna see that I'm Asian very quickly. I am not somebody who can hide my queerness very easily. So it just felt like it was a weird conversation, but it was a very like educational conversation too, because I think like he was just echoing what a lot of the studios and the execs were saying about identity at the time. This was like 10 years ago.
I had worked previously, like once before I had signed with my reps, and it was as a trans actress for a trans role. It was just sort of as we were starting to start this push for authentic casting and representation. So when they signed me, it's because they had already sort of been looking for trans talent to represent specifically. So they our conversations stemmed out of their desire to have a trans client. So I didn't have to do a damn thing.
And Nico, how about for yourself?
Yeah, similar to Tituss and to Joel, I had a background in stand-up as well. So, a lot of my reps saw me in a comedy showcase for CVS through the diversity showcase. And so, and I was always out in my stand-up act as well. And I was never the type of a queer actor who was ever, like masculine or straight passing. So I don't think that conversation was even like being broached by anybody who wanted to represent me, because I'm very queer. I'm obviously queer, and like Joel said, obviously Asian. So there's no escaping, what I have to bring to the table. But the thing that I did appreciate with my agents, who I'm still with to this day, is they were the ones who says, like, we don't only see you as a queer actor. We're going to submit you for like, all these other roles that I didn't personally think at the time that I would really fit into. But they sort of just like made sure that my worries were taken care of, that I wasn't just like being pigeonholed into those roles.
I don't know that I had an issue with coming out to my reps as much as I did like around the time I had come out and like figured out who the fuck I was also the same time I started going to therapy and learning to set boundaries for myself. So I think they felt more I don't know, I had more issues with them in terms of like the boundaries that I was setting for myself, which was no longer like me just accepting anything that would come my way. And so I since have parted ways with said reps. Also took my brown ass out to another agency who knows me to be queer, who knows me to be Gonyeka and also just knows me to be an artist who exists within my identities, but also outside of them, and like being able to create as a creator and as an actor.
I love that. Now, have any of you ever experienced any type of homophobia on set or seen it, and how did you react? Joel, I'll start with you.
Dang, just get next to it.
I've been fairly lucky that like I've worked on pretty like progressive sets. I would say like a lot of the homophobia that I've experienced has probably felt a little bit more like benevolent homophobia, if that makes any sense, where people say sort of ignorant things in an attempt to make me feel more comfortable, or just sort of like centering my queerness in a way that like makes me feel other, but like they're trying to be helpful. Like I had a director like say to me one time, I was doing a scene where I had to like catch a ball, and they were like, oh, if you're not comfortable like catching a ball, we don't want to embarrass you. And like it was clear that it was like a gay thing, and I was like, thank you for your looking out for me, I guess, but I'm gay and I can catch a ball. Thank you very much. I can catch a lot of things.
Yeah, I had a guest role on Two Broke Girls, and I was on a holding deal with CBS at the time. This was right after the showcase that they did, and there was one line in the script where I had to say that basically it was implying that my character was a pedophile because he was gay. Just one line. And I was like, do you really have to say that he's into underage boys? Can't that just be whatever? And so I like, told that to somebody from CBS, not knowing that they were like, hey, I hope you don't mind. I actually forwarded what you said to the head of the network at the time, and it really escalated all the way to the top. And they're like, your concerns are being met. And I'm just like, I don't want to be blacklisted from the industry. I still want to keep this job. Because when you at that time, like when you haven't really sort of like quote unquote made it, like you feel like every wrong step you make would be like, it's going to be your demise. And then I really did truly feel like I'm never going to work again. They're going to think that I'm like that minority he's complaining about, like who couldn't take a joke, blah, 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 blah. And I was sweating bullets for so long. And they did eventually change the line to something less offensive, but it was still kind of offensive. And, I just kind of had to like take the job and be happy that I was being a paid working actor and just sort of grin and bear it.
Oh, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Nicole, how about you?
Similarly, I've been very, very fortunate on my sets to have been in progressive environments and to be felt like I was being taken care of on set. I think my experience with transphobia is more after the fact, with fans of the show on social media, and not always being looked after by the shows or by the studios. And then they're kind of like, okay, it's out, we're promoting, do this Instagram takeover, and like just kind of being thrown to the wolves. And you're like, oh wow, I really didn't realize that our fans are fucking crazy and they really don't love that I'm here. And that was also more just my experience with social media in general. So that's not really I think necessarily congruent to homophobia or transphobia on set, because in that regard I've been very, very fortunate.
The few times that I have experienced something would be something along the lines of using gay as a negative description or something, and then I make it a point to be like, because that's bad, right? Is that why you're using it? And then like, no, I didn't know. You know what I mean? I was like, no, I don't know what you mean, because when you say it, someone's listening and it has an effect. And so it would be like, it was more like a learning experience, I think. And these people are actors who have become friends of mine, who doesn't justify the comments they made at the moment, but they've learned from it. But it's also not our responsibility to teach every time. And I feel like we've been doing that a lot. Like, we're teaching all the time. It's like, you should know that you have friends who are gay. Why are you using that slur? Why are you using that as a negative? Like, why do I have to remind you? It's like, no, I know. It's just like it's a high school thing when I was in school. That's so gay. And it's like, it's not okay. So just like that. Aside from that being the case, no, there's been moments where I've been told, I had an episode coming out for the character that I was playing recently, and I was talking to the director about this afterwards, and he said, he's a great guy, Kyle Nowicek. He was just like, yeah, man, I remember that day, we're shooting and you did the first take and you got so emotional, and I remember going like, do it again, because do you think you'd be that emotional? And I was like, have you come out to anyone? Yeah. Have you come out to anyone? He's all like, touche. And this is a white cis hetero man, and it was like, touche. And again, I love Kyle. He's fantastic. But he said it was a learning experience for him in that moment, because he would have never even thought. He was just thinking, maybe we should do it like where it's not so like painful for him. And I was like, yeah, I'm literally channeling my own coming out right now. So
if that were to be like a queer person behind the lens, there would be no question about what that experience would be.
Yeah.
We should get paid for all the education we have to do on set.
Yes.
Also, that writer credit, because we have to rewrite these lines.
Yeah. And since then, we this past year we won the GLAAD Award for that episode, which is really amazing and fantastic. And at the award show, he was sitting next to me, and he did the sweetest thing. He was like, "Hey man, I looked back at that shooting with you, like, thanks man, like you really did and I was like, thank you, that's so nice, and it's so great that I was there to kind of have that moment with you, a moment of learning. But what if, like Devery said, it would have been a question if someone was behind the lens or in the room saying, maybe we shouldn't question how someone should feel when they're coming out, because especially from a queer actor who has gone through those emotions, maybe let them kind of do one take where they feel comfortable in their own skin doing it the way they think the character would, and then maybe have, some notes from upstairs. I don't know.
I was going to say, similarly, I've been on really progressive sets, but then, as the stories have been shared, I'm like, oh, no, there was this time. Oh, no, there was this. Oh, yeah, okay. And I think it's, a lot of it hasn't been necessarily directed at me, but I think it's been a lot of similar, educational moments, unpaid labor, playing a two-spirit character and essentially having to define to everyone what two-spirit means, and then getting the next draft of a script and it being literally a Wikipedia search in the dialogue on what two-spirit was. Just not having Indigenous, queer, and two-spirit writers in the room. But that's been, again, it's been more so me being made to feel like a diversity hire, or my own queerness kind of being exploited, where there's a character who wasn't necessarily queer before, but then as soon as they learn that I am queer, all of a sudden these storylines come through, which is great, and I'm always happy to play. But I
like there needs to be a conversation about that, on if that's something I'm willing to lend from my own experience and identities. But I find the thing that I've been coming up most against in the industry, in spaces, is like making sure that people's pronouns are respected. Like, I feel like people are always rolling their eyes at me when I'm like trying to encourage people to put pronouns on the call sheet, when I'm trying to remind people what actors or crew members' pronouns are, and it just not necessarily being taken seriously is something that's been coming up a lot. So yeah, like, I didn't think there was, but as we've been talking in this conversation, I'm like,
I've also been sort of reeling as everyone's been sharing, but I really haven't. I feel really lucky and grateful that, like, it's the sets that I've been on in the 3 years I've been out for have been, as most people are saying, fairly progressive. It's just this, it's the less tangible stuff. It's the experiential stuff, as everybody's pointing to, of like feeling like the hetero couples on the show have sort of love scenes that look a certain way, and my character, who's in love with a woman, when we have sex, it's covered only to a certain degree, or like we kiss drastically less times on camera than the hetero couples do, or just tiny things like that, which truly might not be a thing that they're intentionally doing, but it's really hard to digest when you're the queer performer playing that part and really believe in the storyline and the importance of it.
All the time, every job I've ever had, but not because it's like so overt. It's largely because most everything, as we all know if you are taking in oxygen, is rooted in systemic white supremacy. So like, and it just, and it's not been so much overt as it has been a result of having very little vocabulary. There's so few words to describe the hues and range of emotion that we go through when we encounter something that we don't understand. And most of my encounters with homophobia, transphobia, racism has just been from someone who just didn't know what to do. And Harvey, you were saying something about it, we shouldn't have to teach all the time. And, that's during the resurgence of the awareness of the Black Lives Matter movement again, which has never gone anywhere. But there was this rhetoric going around where we often would say, we shouldn't have to teach you at this point, we're not going to do that anymore, yada, yada. But like, if we don't, who's going to do it? And if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Then how then will we move past these moments? It's kind of like, while we should not be tasked with that, it is largely our responsibility, because to operate under the assumption that people who are ignorant are desirous of knowing better that's just not it, because they're not, because if they were, they would. So it's our responsibility to teach.
Speaking of the responsibility to teach, was there ever a time that you had to educate writers when it comes to queer stories? And also, were there times where you read a script and it was either too cliche or almost borderline offensive when telling a queer story? Nicole, I'll start with you.
I'm a tiny guy. I mean, it is, Devery, what you were saying about like not having two-spirit people in the room, not having two-spirit people directing or writing or part of the production process. I have very much felt that with being the only trans person on set, is the burden really does often fall on me to correct people. I'm the first person they're going to, hey, how does this script look? Hey, what do we want to do? Hey, can you tell us what's transphobia? And just like, and and it's like, the thing is like, I'm happy you're asking the question. I'm happy that I'm involved in the conversation. I just don't love being the only person involved, because my experience as a cis-passing white trans girl who's had accepting parents, had access to gender affirming care at a young age, my experience with transness is not a cookie cutter copy paste. There's so many different ways to experience transness. There's so many different ways to experience queerness, and it's so intersectional with every other aspect of our lives that my own singular experience being a trans person doesn't even begin to cover the full range of stories that we want and need to tell. So I'm happy that you're asking me, but girl, ask somebody else too. Like, it should never be a situation where you have queer characters and not queer writers to at least go with those characters. If you're going to have a trans character, hire a trans writer too, because it shouldn't just be on that actor's now job also to play educator and be the token person. And well, if something goes wrong, we asked Nicole.
I completely agree. Because sometimes, I mean, like, especially when I first started working, I would be hesitant to share my experience because I was like Nicole said, I'm like, I'm not the only, like, please don't take my word as like definitive for like the gay experience or the Asian experience, the queer experience. So, yeah, I definitely experienced some hesitancy of voicing my opinions on certain matters because I didn't want it to have that responsibility just land on me. But then, if I don't say anything, then where are they getting their information? Yeah, it's such a a delicate dance sometimes because you have to put every set that you walk into. I'm very hyper aware of like, well, are there any other queer people here? Are there any other Asian people here? Like, who else can I sort of like buddy up with that I know is gonna like understand my experience and like has my back if I have to be like, this is on the page. Like, can you believe this? Like, who can we talk to about fixing this?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that everyone else has said already. It's frustrating, I think, because we so often go into these projects and aren't allowed to represent an individual. We're being asked to represent everybody. And that is like, it's just impossible to do, and it's impossible to do well. And you're going to let people down when you attempt to do that. And I think like for me, like I'm so lucky that I've worked with creators now that have like sort of allowed me to be an individual and not asked me to represent the full breadth of experience of every queer person out there, because it's just, and I think like what we need to do is demand less that every queer representation on television and movies and in media is perfect, and just demand more so that we're seeing more across the spectrum and not expect every representation to embody, everyone's experience, and just give us more options to look to search for ourselves.
Yeah, you hope that the writer's room is reflective of the stories and the characters that are being are telling the story. But so often it's like one person in a room of 10, and the burden, well, not, I mean, yeah, it probably does feel like I've never been that person in the writer's room, but the burden that falls on them per Nicole's experience, and also B, just like that's the slice of the pie is sort of increasingly unforgivable, quite frankly. So yeah, we just got to hope that it keeps evolving and keeps changing. And I really love what Joel just said. That's the only way forward.
It does feel frustrating sometimes, but I totally agree with Tituss and what Nico was saying, that it feels like it's like kind of being a tightrope. You want to educate, you want to be there to help us move forward, obviously, like Tituss was saying, but also it feels like, why does it feel like it has to be my experience, like Nicole was saying? Because my experience is my experience, and I can share my experience. And in my show specifically, also being Mexican descent, there was no writers in the writers room that were Mexican. So whenever we have a scene with my family, they were nice enough to let me kind of input, like, I don't know who would say that, because some of the words were kind of Google translated, like Devery said. And so I would read the script and I was like, no, we don't say this sentence like this. Can we say like this? And they're like, yes, that's a good idea. So now whenever we have a scene with a family, I have to go upstairs in the writer's room and kind of write out with the writers, like, maybe we should try this and help with that, which I'm okay with. And I love that I can be a part of that. But yeah, sometimes it just get a little bit like, should I be doing this, or should I,
writing credit.
But yeah, it's just walking that rope of like, I want to educate, but it does get like, but Tituss is right. Like, if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
It's part of what comes with being the boss, though, isn't it? It's part of what comes with being the captain of your own ship. And while we may not often find ourselves in positions where we are getting paid properly to do the thing that we're ultimately tasked with doing, like it's going to be kind of unbalanced, I still think I hesitate to comment on how laborious or tedious it is to be singled out to ask to carry the burden for a whole legion of people. Because I think about Harriet Tubman. This bitch went back over 600 times to the plantations to get people. I don't think she had time to be thinking about, I wish it wasn't me. Like, so I just think maybe it's us. We're the ones we're waiting for. So, you know, I put our fatigue here, but when we're out there, I say balls to the wall, march your black ass or your Asian ass or your Latino ass up to that writer's room, or change the line. Don't be scared to do it, because they don't know any better. And if they have the audacity to write such idiocy, then you have the audacity to present them with better options.
And how about for you, Devery? Since you are a writer and director of your show, is it almost easier to navigate that?
I did get my ass into the writer's room since I was that annoying actor with so many notes.
Yes.
But now because I'm a WGA member now, we are on strike. So I'm not going to speak too much to that since I'm very supportive of the strike. But I wasn't always the only queer person in the room. There were other queer Indigenous folks, poets like Tommy Pico. At one point, there was the incredible filmmaker who is trans, Sydney Freeland. And I think that there's also Erica Tremblay. Like, I think that there's such a reason why our show feels inherently queer, despite never speaking about identities. And it's because there are so many Indigenous queer creatives behind the lens. And it feels like there is strength in numbers, and it's one of the only spaces in this industry where we've been afforded to band together like that.
Now, our community is in constant attack. Our rights are in constant attack. When you see people like Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence announce he's running for president, when you see these individuals who are going to be running for president of our country, how does that make you feel? And how can Hollywood fight against them and their anti-queer rhetoric?
You got me on that one, bro. I have no idea.
I was rewatching Milk the other day on the plane, and it struck me so much how the same fight is still happening. It feels so secular. Like they were talking about legislation in Florida back in 1975 about keeping gay teachers out of jobs and all of these things, and it was just like the same rhetoric is being used, and it was at once like so frustrating because it feels like, will we ever be done with this fight? And it was also inspiring because we fought through it then, and we fought back the tide then, and we can do it again. It is just exhausting to think about, but I think like sitting on this panel is inspiring to me. It's energizing to me to see these faces, to see all of the, our different experiences and being able to come together like this. It is inspiring, and I think like we can do it. It's just, looking to the past and seeing how they did it and fighting on.
I am such an avid believer in the power of people's voices and people's platforms and stories. It is how we connect to each other. It is how we share empathy and share our experiences. And I think especially right now, there's so much that needs to change, and there's so much to address, and it feels like it is such a massive beast that we are up against. And I think because of that, because it feels so volatile at times, because it feels so difficult to tackle, people choose not to. People choose not to speak on it. For whatever reason, they're afraid of getting it wrong. They're afraid that, oh, well, this doesn't really have anything to do with me. This doesn't really concern me. First of all of these fights are connected. It exactly what Joel was saying. It feels like we've had this conversation before because we have. And it hasn't always just been about queer people. It hasn't always just been about trans people. It's been, we've been having this conversation when it comes to race and religion and gender and sex and equal pay. And it is the same shit recycled over and over again, but we are consistently told not to compare our experiences and not to pay attention to the intersectionality of these struggles. And honestly, to me, that feels like the shitty boss telling you not to ask what your coworkers get paid. Like, it's giving income inequality. And I think it's so important for us to recognize the similarities where we've been. And I think the role that Hollywood plays is expressing that and sharing that. We have all of these directors and actors and writers who have such massive platforms that and people look up to them, and they're not speaking about these issues for whatever reason, because it's controversial, because, oh, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with them. But I think when we look at history in the very limited way that we are taught it, I know I, growing up, was always hearing about dreadful things and thinking, God, why didn't anybody do anything? Why didn't anybody say anything? How did people let it get this bad? It's because people just, it's the apathy. It's not enough to just not be, actively hateful. If you are standing by and staying silent while this kind of systemic violence is perpetrated and legislated, then, mama, what good are you for the cause?
It feels like such a fear of discomfort.
Yeah,
there's an apathy and a fear of discomfort when
what kind of world do we want to live in? And it's so imperative that people start talking about it and start having these conversations, because all of this stuff, if it's happening quietly, it's so overwhelming to just, again, be on your own. We need allies. We need people standing with us and marching with us and speaking up with us, and using their voices. All hands on deck at this point.
When you ask that question, it makes me freeze up, because I immediately think, oh, where do I go march, or where do I go donate to, or sign up for, or how to be active, or to be or to activate my activism becomes it makes me feel stuck. But I think we're doing it, though. To your question, I think this is doing it. It's the sharing of information, like Nicole was pointing towards, and the all hands on deck. It's all of us doing what we already know how to do, perhaps just more of it, and sharing it with each other. And I rely on my government official friends to tell me where to go and where to appear when they need me, and they rely on me to bring my whatever they think I got when it's time to show up. You know what I mean? So I just think, I think what is that quote Nina Simone says about the artist's job at a certain point? It's called to do the thing we've been doing. I'm botching it horribly, but I think we're doing it by talking, and representation matters.
But do you guys feel that you have to almost do double the fight? Because I feel like everyone on this panel is a minority within a minority. So do you feel like you have to fight twice?
I think it's all the same, as Nicole said. Sorry to dominate this. I really do. I don't think of it as splitting off. Like while we are the intersection of so many different things, when you go out, one or two things are going to present themselves first to other people. But my thought process when I'm fighting back, if I'm fighting for women's, rights to choose and to govern their own bodies, I'm also fighting for gay rights. You know what I mean? It's all civil rights.
Now, something we touched base on earlier was mental health. How is navigating mental health in the Hollywood space, being a queer person, been for each of you?
I do a lot of therapy and go to some other sort of supportive programs, and I'm really plugged into my community. And truly, everybody's saying it, but I'm not sure I've ever sat in a room like this with other performers who have such disparate experiences, but also we all have this thing in common, and therefore a level of I feel tremendous comfort from having these kinds of conversations and just being in these spaces. So that would be my very lame answer. I don't really know if I know yet, but I'm going to keep thinking about that.
To echo what Jodi just said, I think it's about solidarity and surrounding myself with chosen family that is there to support me. And I think it's about being unafraid to communicate when I'm not okay. I think there's a real I think urging from a lot of people to be radically positive all the time, and that there's a place for that. But I think for me, I think it's been really helpful over the last couple of years to just be really honest when I'm not okay and I don't have the energy to put up a front and to be positive all the time for the people around me. And it's in those moments when I think the chosen family that I surrounded myself with really does uplift me and pick up the slack and let me know that it's okay. And I think that there needs to be a balance of sort of being transparent about where we are mentally, and also when we need to, show that radical positivity to make sure that it's not just all negativity that we're putting out in the world, but it's a real balancing act.
I'll echo everything everyone has said today. Just it's a balancing act. I think sometimes just we're dealing with a lot of things coming our way with being a minority within a minority within a marginalized group. So like Tituss said, when we fight for one thing, we're fighting for everything. So when we're I'm leaving this conversation out rebooted, and I gotta thank Tituss for that, and I thank Nicole and Devery and all of you, because I feel more of a mission. I guess I've been thinking about the last couple of years, and it could get really feel defeated, and mentally that could take over its toll. And mentally, you want to like take yourself away from it, is because it does have an effect on you and your work, and it takes its toll. So therapy is needed, but it also having the right mindset is what's important to continue to fight. And above all, we must be courageous. So that's the bottom line. So thank everyone on this panel today for reigniting my ass.
These past 3 years have been just extremely, extremely difficult. And I think we are having a very different conversation about mental health, than we did before the pandemic. Me personally, it's like, yes, I've been in therapy for years, but it's only in this last year that I've really been like focused on really unpacking shit and really doing the work. And part of me really wishes that I had done it sooner, because I have just seen such a shift in my mental state. I was looking back at like previous, like clips of interviews that I'd done, like right when the pandemic sort of happened. And, like I wish I had, the strength or the wherewithal, like Joel said, to just really say at the time that like, what, I'm not okay. I shouldn't be out in front of the camera. I shouldn't be doing these interviews. But, I also feel like, at the time, especially doing the job that we do, we feel like, like we're so fortunate to be working at this level that it's very hard to say no sometimes, like you feel like you really just have to. Well, how many people get this opportunity to be sort of like a representative for their community? So you have to be okay. You have to get out there and march out in front of the camera and like voice for everybody. But now, now after a year of sort of like intense therapy, I'm like, I think like Joel said, it's we have to know when we are truly capable of doing the things that we're supposed to be doing, and know when to say no.
Nicole, how about yourself?
Yeah, I am such a big advocate for therapy. I've been in therapy since second grade, on and off. For the, transition process, you have to be. After high school, I stopped going to therapy for a long time. And I just in this past year started going again, because I was realizing like, wow, I really haven't had a space since I started acting, since I moved out to Los Angeles, since I did Supergirl, to really start to unpack stuff. And I was dealing with such intense levels of stress and anxiety. And I was like, I'm doing great. Why do I feel bad? And so now I'm in therapy twice a week, and there's so much, even outside of Hollywood, there's just so much that we as queer people get pelted with every day. And I recently took some time away from social media and went on a trip. I went to my friend's wedding and was just trying to disconnect myself from everything. And it felt so impossible, because I was like, okay, so great. Then when I get back, I get to slam into it all at once like a wall. It's finding the ways to hold all of it has felt so difficult, but having the space to talk about that stuff, talk about things in my personal life and my professional life as a queer person has been so important to me. And I'm such a big advocate for like everyone should go to therapy. Do like 2 sessions. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But I promise you, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is really helpful. Oh, wow, this is why people love this. I love it. It's so necessary.
What about for you, Tituss?
Oh, I'm always on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I'm not trying to make a joke. Here's the difference, though. I know the truth. I know whose I am. I know what I am. I know that I'm not generating this nonsense around me. This is a dense world to live in, dense playing field with lots of low vibration energy. And when you try and focus and rise above the fray, even just a little bit, it is a strong force that comes in your direction to pull you back. So the chug forward is a very present, ever present one, but there is no other alternative for me. So like, just sort of staying to the course and, straight ahead. That's the only way up and out. And I also desperately want to, not to be all like spiritual about this, but complete whatever my assignment is here this time around in this life. I want to get it done because I'm not trying to come back down here with these crazy folks. For no other reason, I'm gonna clear this shit up.
Get me out of here.
Get me out of here.
Now, when telling queer stories, why do you feel like so many people feel like Hollywood only tells the story of the gay white male, especially given the backlash of movies like Bros? And Joel, I want to start with you because you had such an iconic, inclusive movie in Fire Island.
I mean, Tituss said it up top. Everything goes back to is rooted in white supremacy in this industry systemically, and so that's going to include when we make inroads in representation elsewhere. But I let the white gays have their representation. I'm less interested in attacking specific examples of representation like that, and more angry with the industry that's not greenlighting more. I think like it's Rose was what it was, and it probably meant a lot to a lot of people, but I'm less interested in sort of like going after that movie and saying to the studios, why is this the only story you're interested in telling? And I think like we just have to be demanding more from the people behind the camera and saying like this is not enough, and there's so many more experiences, and like I didn't get it all right either. I'm the first person to admit that in my movie, and I'm not. And the thing is like for me, like I don't want Billy Eichner to be telling stories about queer people of color. That's not his job. That's not his experience, and we shouldn't be asking him of that. It would be all love to Billy. It would be a disaster if he tried. So I think like we just have to be demanding more from the studios themselves and saying like take chances on more of the spectrum of experience that we have as queer people.
What about for you, Harvey? Because you are a part of the upcoming Blue Beetle, which is amazing DC movie, and you are an openly queer, gay, Latino male in a big budget film. What does that feel like for you?
That obviously is a big bonus being part of the project and being proud of who I am. But for me, that movie is going to be what I wish I had as a child, which was Latino superhero. And I was so excited when I read the script because I felt seen. Their home life and the things they were watching on television, the radio was playing certain songs without getting into detail of what the story is. But it just felt like I was like, whoa, they're going to allow this to be made. I was still like questioning that the studio would allow this to be made, even when I knew that it was going to be made, just because I was hoping, I was like, please don't change the lines, don't change the scene, don't change anything. I really want people to see this world. And they didn't. They allowed this world to exist and breathe, and that's going to be in theaters August 18th. So even if you're not Latino yourself, you are being welcome into the house, into the barbecue. And if you are Latino, you're going to be seen on screen for the first time. And that's, for me, worth every fight. So, yeah.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, I was super excited. It was one of the few projects that I've ever been like a part of that I'm like, yes, like the whole cast is Latino, the director, Angel is Latino. Like it's gonna be incredible, and just can't wait for my nieces and nephews to see this world and know that there's a possibility for them to be represented on screen.
Congratulations.
Another topic I want to discuss, what are your thoughts on the argument that awards should do away with the best actor and actress categories and just have one universal award? Nicole, I'll start with you.
I will always be the first person to say, like, listen, a gendered society, what's the point? You know, I think as long as we still maintain space for women to be recognized, because I think we run the danger of, okay, we're only having one category. Oh, wow, now only men are being recognized. So it's a balancing act of how do we make space for queer people? How do we recognize that because it is the same conversation between, like, now actresses were like, no, you can just call us actors. Like this, the stress does not have to be on our gender. Because we have now even more and more tremendous non-binary actors who are killing the game, and we shouldn't be asking them to compromise their own identity to be recognized in an awards setting. The rules are whatever we make them. So we are well within our liberties to, hey, if this isn't working out as time progresses, we should be allowed to change things and allow things to be fluid and let people be recognized. I think, yeah, as long as no one's being left out, that's the point. Recognizing good work.
It seems more relevant to add more categories along like genre lines, you know, like it's crazy that the two ways we've delineated acting awards is just by gender and then by supporting and then lead, and that's it. Whereas it feels like we could be more like breaking out of just the binary of gender. We could find ways to be even more creative about the ways we award and celebrate these performances.
Even these days, like the lines between comedy and drama are so much more blurred. And like, what does that even mean anymore? Yeah.
Everything's so subjective.
Yeah.
The whole thing needs an overhaul.
I feel like there should also be like a ensemble, you know, like only SAG awards have like an ensemble category where like all the award shows should really have an ensemble category, because for the most part, I mean, that's the experience I took from doing these projects. It's like how amazing it is to be in that sort of like group setting and the product that you are creating with everybody, not just like your one scene partner.
It's a team effort.
Yeah, because there is an argument from the other side that says, you know, if we do make one category, will most of the winners be straight white males?
Yes, it will be.
Maybe they should get their own special category and the rest of us can be recognized. Pearl. I'm like, you guys are so worried about it. You guys can have your own little category and you can duke it out amongst yourselves.
Now, I want to close this out by asking each of you this question. What does the word pride mean to you?
Pride lately for me has, and I've always used this quote, and I don't know who to attribute it to, but pride for me means we have nothing to prove, only to share.
Pride is the absence of fear. It's the absence of shame. It is a radical act of self-love, I think, in a world that is asking us to hide all the time. And I think it's, you know, it's easy, you know, I'm of a generation that came up with pride being a party, you know, for a lot of people. And it's easy to be cynical about that now with the corporatization of pride and say, like, do we really need all of these pride campaigns and all of these things? But I think, like, for me, pride is, especially as a movement, it should, we're so desperate, I think, now to get back to the fight of it. You know, pride is a fight. It's a battle as much as it is to gain that feeling of pride. It's a fight every day, and it's a fight, you know, sort of on a systemic level. And yeah, I think it's really important that we get back to those roots as pride as a protest.
Oof, I love that. Yeah, I think for me, it's two things exactly. It's like immediately conjures like a profound sense of community and all the things that come along with that, which is like creating more safe spaces for our community and creating and yeah, maintaining our rights, progressing our rights. And then in a much more personal level, it just feels like connection to self and a sense of freedom, which is sometimes all too rare, you know?
Pride is a time, obviously started as a protest and is a time when we riot and we band together and we stand with those who are most vulnerable because there's strength in numbers. It's one of the only times we're able to publicly celebrate our communities and where we're from. And for me, I also view it as like a time of reflection, to honor ancestors who come before us, our queer elders, while also recognizing how far we've come as a community and how much work still needs to be done, and holding corporations and society to account in that.
To echo what Joel said, it's living without fear, living authentically and visibly. I think the more visible we are, obviously the more change and good it does. I too am a homosexual of a certain generation. So I remember when Pride really was also like, it was before it was way too corporate, and it was about community and the fight and the things that we really had to to really fight for our rights. And I've seen the change from that to how corporate it's gotten. And I think it is like Joel said, I think it's time we really should like get back to our roots and recognize that Pride is a protest, and we're here to sort of stick together and uplift each other and uplift our community. And yeah, that's I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Joel and Nico, what everyone said, I think Pride to me means to live your authentic self without fear. And that's it. Just to live your authentic life and live it without fear.
Sort of similarly to what Joel was saying, I think historically I have approached Pride in a way that, this is a celebration for me. This is a time for me to be with my people and to party and to get a little messy. But as I've gotten older, as I've been a part of this fight more and more, I recognize Pride as an act of rebellion and as an act of radical visibility and existing in a society and in a culture that would rather you not. I think that is something that more and more of us are coming to realize. I think we are guilty of having become a little lax, I'll speak for myself. I was very guilty of becoming very lax and, things are great. We're making so many strides. Yes, we got marriage equality. Everything's going well. And these last few years have been such a rude awakening for me that it is not always rainbows and sunshine, and Pride is a time to make a stand and state firmly what you believe in, who you are, that you're not going anywhere. And when it comes to all of the corporate sponsors, like a certain department store, I think that it is time for the corporations, for the people who are showing up for the party, to recognize what it's actually about. And it's not enough to just have rainbows in your store. You actually have to know what that means. And you have to stand firmly in that, because it's not a joke. We're not messing around anymore. We were never messing around. It is imperative that if you're going to show up and if you're going to be an ally, you need to know what that means. And you need to know everything that comes with that.
I love that. I want to thank each and every single one of you for joining us today. But I also want to say thank you to each of you, because you contribute to the fight and you are saving so many lives through your stories and through your talent. So thank you, each of you. I appreciate you, and the community appreciates all of you. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.